What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Stand Up Guys Podcast, episode 142. I'm your host, incomparable Zach Jones, joined as always by the Groot to my rocket, Lester Jones.
I am Lester.
Conspicuous by his absence once again this week is, of course, the star of the porn parody, Garglings of the Phallic Penis.
Oh, wow. This is how we start. This is how it starts, people.
Where he, of course, played the title role of Peter Phil, a.k.a. Star Gaylord.
Wow.
Hey, listen, he was supposed to be here.
I hope this is the end of your
It's not.
the material that you put thought into.
Oh, okay, yeah, it is definitely the end to what I put thought into. Well, if you couldn't guess, this is going to be our review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We're very excited. So anyone who hasn't watched or listened to any of our reviews in the past, basically what we do is first a nice little, non-spoiler review and thoughts. But then, unlike, your average podcast, we're going to do a very deep dive and go scene by scene, as many scenes as I could remember, and do a real deep breakdown of the plot. Before we do that, let's look at the overview on Rotten Tomatoes. Right now, the movie sits at an 80% on the old Rotten Tomatoes. The official synopsis reads as thus. In Marvel Studios' Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, our beloved band of misfits are looking a bit different these days. Peter Quill, still reeling from the loss of Gamora, must rally his team around him to defend the universe along with protecting one of their own. A mission that, if not completed successfully, could quite possibly lead to the end of the Guardians as we know them. The movie is, of course, directed by James Gunn. It stars Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, a.k.a. Star-Lord, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Dave Bautista as Drax, Karen Gillan as Nebula, Pom Klementieff as Mantis, Vin Diesel as the voice of Groot, Bradley Cooper as the voice of Rocket Raccoon, Sean Gunn as Kraglin, I cannot pronounce this guy's name, Chukwudi Iwuji as the High Evolutionary, Will Poulter as Adam Warlock, Maria Bakalova as the voice of Cosmo the Space Dog, Sylvester Stallone as Stakar O'Gord, and Elizabeth Debicki as Aisha. Okay. So yeah, now, Lester, you and I are both huge fans of the first Guardians movie. It's definitely up there, probably, if not my favorite, probably my second favorite of the MCU movies. And I think the second movie was probably a step down, but I know a lot of people dislike the second movie. I still enjoy it. And so I was pretty excited going into this third one. And I got to say, while it doesn't reach the heights of the first movie, I still like this movie quite a bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was probably better than the second movie.
I think so too.
The first movie is pretty close to a perfect movie.
It really is.
But yeah, no, I had high expectations. I was surprised to learn that this is supposed to be like the end of the Guardians movies, at least for the time being. Personally, I think it's their strongest franchise.
I mean, we'll talk about it when we get into spoilers, but I think there is still going to be somewhat of a continuation.
Well, I don't know if there's going to be any spin-offs, and then
I mean, that's somewhat of a spoiler there, son.
That's just a feature.
Let's wait till the very end.
It's outside of the movie.
Let's get to the very end, though. I
already told you.
I would consider that a slight spoiler, even though everyone probably would maybe assume. But, yeah, I mean, performance-wise, I think Chris Pratt and the whole cast really continued to do great in their roles. If there's one criticism that I would have is I think some of the new casts were maybe underutilized. I mean, one problem that's in a lot of Marvel movies, and you could even argue, I would argue this in the first Guardians movie, is the villain is kind of underdeveloped. Even though the actor that plays the High Evolutionary is very good, I think that character overall, much like, he's probably more interesting than Ronan Accuser in the first movie, but I think he's still maybe a little just he's there. It definitely, I think, focuses more on the heroes. And then Adam Warlock, who, I thought would be a more major character. I thought he was just kind of like, like this movie, I question whether it even really needed him.
Yeah, I can see that.
He didn't seem like a real prestigious character,
right?
To me. I'm trying to think of like how much I can say before we get into spoilers, because I don't want to.
I mean, I think as the main bad guy, I think he worked okay for me. Like it's kind of interesting that the second movie was not our favorite, but I really did like Kurt Russell.
Oh yeah. I will say I feel like this movie, even though there's a lot of great jokes in it, maybe overall has a more dour tone than the other ones.
There's a lot of somber scenes. I mean, well, right from the pretty much the beginning, you're facing the clock with.
Well, don't do that yet.
Yeah, Jesus.
But yes, there's definitely some.
I hope you're having as much fun as I am.
Well, you got to be. I know a lot of people are sensitive to spoilers, so I want to be. I want to be sensitive to that. But yeah. Oh, and one other just kind of general thing I'll say is, in I believe it's one of the Avengers, maybe Endgame. He ends up getting that Zune device, so now he has some more modern music, and I think because of that, the soundtrack in this movie, while it does have some bangers, it also has some choices that I'm like, overall makes the soundtrack not as good. Probably just because it has a more modern music that's in many instances not as good. I don't know if you felt that too.
Yeah, I definitely felt that.
A part of me was wishing he still just had the old classics.
I love the 80s.
Yeah. 70s and 80s music on average is a lot better. Okay. So yeah, definitely like if we're just going by the scale of like see this in theaters, wait for streaming, don't see it. I mean, I'm firmly go see this in theaters. You too?
Yeah, it's a fun romp. Definitely worth seeing on the big screen.
100%. Yeah, this was very good. So yeah. Okay, guys, we're going to go heavy into spoilers here. So spoilers from this point on. Hope you enjoy. As always...
Can I talk about the movie now?
Yes, you can.
Can I? Can I start now?
In fact, I got to say, like, as we get into this, I definitely, like, forgot some stuff. So please chime in when you notice I'm skipping over.
I don't exactly have the most stellar memory. Plus, there were, like, especially with Rocky, you've got the continuing story, which is, like, probably 10 scenes, but it's one story all broken up.
I was going to say there's a lot of Rocket flashback scenes, and I put them in here, but I'm 100% sure I didn't put them in exactly the right places. So just know that. But anyway, we open the movie on Baby Rocket in his cage, all scared to death as he's being pulled out of his cage by the High Evolutionary.
High sympathy tones right from the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we immediately cut to modern day Rocket on Nowhere. He's listening to an acoustic version of Creep by Radiohead, which seems to go on forever. A great example of, not as good a music in this one. But anyway, as that's playing, he kind of walks around Nowhere, and you get to see all the characters. I remember, like, there's a Drax and Nebula, like, hanging a sign. You got Kraglin and Cosmo, like Cosmo's like trying to pull like a steak out of his hands or something like that. But anyway, Rocket eventually gets to Star-Lord, who's drunk and yells at him for taking his Zune, but then he immediately passes out because he's drunk, and we get the sense that he's basically been drinking a lot lately. So Nebula picks up Star-Lord and basically goes and puts him to bed. Rocket is showing off. He's got these anti-gravity boots that allow him to walk upside down. Kraglin is struggling to use the whistle arrow that he got from Yondu. They like set up this course for him to try, and he like messes it up.
Which he's trying this in like a crowded marketplace, and it seems like a horrible idea. Like, go out in the desert, buddy.
Well, it doesn't. Actually, he even ends up accidentally putting the arrow into like Nebula's chest.
Right.
So if it was a regular person, they'd be dead. But she's like a robot enough that she's fine.
It's just comic relief.
But then Cosmo uses her. Now, I think in the comics, Cosmo is a boy dog.
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but here it has like the female cosmonaut.
Yeah,
voice.
she's a female Russian voice. It reminds me of Lady Rainicorn from Adventure Time.
No, I don't watch Adventure Time. She's got a Russian accent.
No, but she's got a voice box
Oh.
that translates, but she speaks like South Korean.
Oh, okay. But then Cosmo uses her telekinetic powers and like easily beats that course he set up. So then like Kraglin calls Cosmo a bad dog, and she gets all upset, and that'll be a thing that like continues throughout the movie.
Yeah, there's this running joke where like he won't take back calling her bad dog, and like it's like the only thing she's upset about.
Yeah, it's like the worst thing you can call a dog. You know?
Please don't call me a bad dog. Take it back.
So on the upside of the soundtrack, "Crazy on You" by Heart plays, which is an awesome
That's
song.
a good song, yeah.
That's playing, and as that's playing, we're introduced to Adam Warlock, who's flying into nowhere, and he immediately just flies right into Rocket. His whole goal there is to get Rocket, but Rocket does manage to escape, and this gets Nebula's attention. Nebula, she has like these like mechanical wings that she can put on and use to fly here,
Right.
which never come up in any other parts of the movie. Although there is a part later on in the movie that she would have been good if she had them.
I wasn't sure if it was like built in or if it was like some kind of a
No, there's a quick
accessory.
scene where she actually grabs it, and so it's like something she puts on herself.
And Warlock, what do they call them? The Celestials?
No, he's not a celestial, but his people, the gold people.
Oh, I thought that's what they called them.
No, a celestial is more like well, Nowhere is a dead celestial, so they're like giant.
Oh, okay.
But no, like Adam Warlock's that gold race of people, they have like a weird name, like the Salvation or something. It's not that,
Okay.
but
We'll call them Goldies. The Goldies.
the Goldies. So yeah, Nebula flies up on her wings. She shoots Adam. They get into a fight, but then Adam basically ends up just like beating her really badly. You know, where like her face goes off to one side because she's all mechanical, and like her limbs like get all messed up. And he basically beats the hell out of her and throws her away. Then at some point, Groot attacks Adam, and Adam like ends up tearing Groot's head off from the rest of his body. So he's just like going around like his head.
Yeah. A head with like tendrils.
Yeah. Kraglin hits Adam with his arrow, which does nothing, and he's just like, "Who did that?" You know.
He's like baby.
Yeah. You know what? The whole thing with Adam Warlock is I expected him to be like more kind of regal for some reason, but he really is just like a dummy.
Right, and that's also another running joke.
Yeah. He's just kind of this like idiot. So now Star-Lord enters the scene. He starts shooting Adam with his element guns. I don't remember exactly what happens here, but Adam must like throw him to the ground or something too. Adam ends up breaking Mantis's arm, and he shoots Rocket because he can like shoot laser beams out of his hand.
Yeah, something like that.
And this like really wounds Rocket. Drax and Adam, Drax shows up, and him and Adam begin to fight, and that kind of takes the fight away from where Rocket is. Now, this is something I didn't think of till right now, but really, like Adam's goal is to collect Rocket for the High Evolutionary.
Right.
But I would think, like, I think the High Evolutionary wants him alive.
Well, essentially, he just wants to like dissect his brain. So, I guess if you threw him in like an ice bucket
Oh, so like if he gets him there fast enough, he could. Okay, that makes sense then. Um, Mantis tells Peter to get some med packs. So Mantis uses one of the packs to fix her arm. And I don't know if they had these in any of the other movies, but there's like these magical things that just kind of heal whatever ails you. So that like puts her arm back in place. And then Peter puts one on Rocket's chest. So then these scenes are like cutting apart from each other. We get a scene where Adam almost defeats Drax until Nebula walks up behind and like stabs him through the chest. And so that hurts Adam Warlock enough to where he retreats. So they end up having to take the med pack off of Rocket because for some reason they notice it's killing him. It's not helping. So they put like Rocket, in a med bay, and they find out that Rocket actually, whoever made him, put a bomb inside of him, and like the med pack is going to trigger that bomb.
Right. Essentially.
So like either he's going to die. If they take the med pack off of him, they can tell like he's going downhill. He's probably going to die within a couple days. But if they leave the med pack on him, they can tell that it's going to cause that bomb to explode. Am I getting that right?
That sounds right.
So I think Nebula or someone like can tell the manufacturer name on one of Rocket's like implants or whatever.
Yeah, they got some kind of scanner.
And do you remember the name of this company? It started with an O. It was something like the Orozco Corp or
I don't know. It's supposedly like what's the bad guy's name again?
The High Evolutionary.
The High Evolutionary. Like he's got like a shell company that allows him to get around like interstellar laws.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I know this company started with an O. It was something like Orozco or something.
Yeah, they
like
scanned.
that.
When they scanned Rocket's chest, there's something in there, but I think they got like his basically like his part number or whatever, his batch, that like they know his code. So the theory is that if they can go to this corporation and get the code to disable this bomb, then they can use MedPack on him and he'll live.
Right. They say there's like some sort of like they call it like a kill key or something, a key that will unlock that bomb and turn it off.
And they figure they've got, what was it, like
2 days?
2 days or something. Yeah.
Now we get a scene where the High Evolutionary yells at Aisha and Adam Warlock for his failure to get Rocket. Now, if you remember, there's the opening scene of Guardians 2, like they actually come in contact with that gold race of people.
Right.
And Elizabeth Debicki's character is Aisha, who is like, I think the leader of that clan, and she's also like Adam Warlock's mother. What
else has she been in? Like I'm like, I recognize her, and then I'm like, I don't know.
The one thing I remember she was in is that what was Tenet, that Christopher Nolan movie Tenet, where things are traveling backwards and stuff.
I don't remember.
And I'm sure she's been in other stuff too, but I don't really remember. Yeah, and like we get the sense that the High Evolutionary's like really like a dick. He really thinks highly of himself. He talks down to everybody. And in this scene, he's basically calling Adam Warlock an idiot. We also find out that he has these like anti-gravity powers because he like slams Adam Warlock down to the ground.
Right, that's something that's come into his repertoire.
And then I think he has a conversation with his scientists where he might allude to the fact that he believes the Guardians will be going to that corporate building, but I'm not 100% sure that I might be wrong about that. But I remember he does have a quick conversation with his scientist buddies there. So yeah, we like I said, I don't remember exactly where all these flashback scenes with Rocket fit in, but we definitely get one somewhere around here, where they do like that preliminary like whatever they do to Rocket, and they put him in this cage, and at that point, like, he doesn't have a scalp, like his bare brain is basically showing, and he meets his fellow cage mates, who we don't this will be another scene where they end up getting names, but there's basically a female like is she like a seal or sea lion?
She's an otter.
Oh, an otter. Yeah, you're right, an otter. There's a walrus guy and a rabbit girl.
Spider rabbit.
Spider rabbit. Yeah. Yeah, and the walrus guy, he's almost like in a wheelchair type apparatus.
Yeah, he's like one of those puppies that has broken legs, so they put wheels on his back.
Basically, yeah. So now back to the present. The team shows up at that corporate headquarters building, or close to it. They end up having to go through like a series of shields, and like Peter has to like do this thing on the ship to get him through the shields. At the same time, him, Mantis, and Drax are having this conversation. I think kind of about like Peter's like recent behavior, his drunkenness, and like him not getting over Gamora, things like that.
Right, and like Mantis tries to get Drax to tell him something because like she's like, he won't listen to me.
Well, that's actually a different scene. The lily pad.
Does that
scene.
come later?
That comes later.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But this did have that funny bit where like he offers Peter like one of those Zag nuts or whatever.
Oh, right.
And like later on, like Mantis is like, "What if I wanted a Zag nut?" And he's like, "Sorry, they're all gone." And then he continues to like eat one. They have a lot of great banter, like Mantis and Drax during this movie. So they get close to that building, but then this I thought was a little weird. So they're like, "Oh no, we ran into something." They end up running into a team of Ravagers led by Sylvester Stallone. So these were the guys. These guys were also in Guardians 2.
Right, and apparently, like, because like to get to this building, there's like 3 layers of shields, and I guess they were hiding behind like this second layer, of
something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, they get through, and then they get attacked.
But the thing is, like everyone acted like surprised, but Nebula knew because she set this whole thing up.
Right. Yeah, she knew. Yeah.
She basically contacted the Ravagers because she knew they were going to need their help to infiltrate this place. I guess she didn't tell the other group members because maybe she was afraid they wouldn't go for it or something.
Did they need them though?
It's questionable because really, well, they do get Gamora's help, which is probably the biggest thing. Because Gamora is with these group of Ravagers, and she ends up joining their mission. I mean, they do give them like they have these work suits to help them blend in once they infiltrate the place.
Right, they do have some assets,
but
I guess.
They probably could have got those on their own.
Yeah, they should have. I don't know.
I think the biggest thing is just they get Gamora's help.
Yeah, they need to get Gamora on the team somehow.
So the team all dressed in colorful spacesuits. If you watched the trailer for the movie, you saw these. And so they end up landing on this corporate building. But the building is weird because it's also kind of like biological in nature.
Right, it's an organic structure.
Yeah.
In space.
We get kind of a comedy scene where like Peter pushes his button on the suit and he thinks he's just talking to Gamora. Mm-hmm. And he kind of has this conversation where he tells about how him and the old Gamora like fell in love, and she's like not buying it. Like, and he kind of like is like trying to get her on board, but she's just not going for it. But then we find out that the other team members were listening in because they got this like really convoluted like system on their suits where like he was talking to everybody instead of just her.
It's funny because he's like using it the way you'd think it would work, and everyone else is like, no, it's this super convoluted method. Like, yeah.
Yeah, because he like, her suit's blue, so he pushes the blue button, which ends up talking to everybody, and they're like, oh no, you know,
if you want to talk
orange
to blue,
means blue, and yellow means, and Drax is like, it's really intuitive. So that was pretty funny. So the team, they infiltrate this facility, and like, it was weird because like they have this scene where they like just barely like cover up this camera, and like James Gunn's wife, she's playing like this person that's monitoring all the cameras.
Oh,
you know?
Okay, that was her.
Yeah, and so they cover up the camera, but then they have to turn on like the gravity to that room, and them doing that just still immediately like gets the guards' attention. And so the guards start coming towards there.
It does give them like time to change, though.
Yeah, so they get time. They see what looks like a locker, so they put their spacesuits in that locker, and now underneath they're wearing like the corporate like jumpsuits or whatever, so they'll blend in. So then the guards show up, led by Nathan Fillion. Now this is something I didn't understand because to me it doesn't look like he's like a different race. He's just a human, but he's in this like really weird suit.
Yeah, they have weird organic suits.
And I'm like, why are they wearing these? They don't even really make sense.
Well, I don't know the purpose, but
I guess
they did have like built-in like thrusters or something.
Yeah, they did. They had like weird
because they could kind of
weapons
fly
or something too.
Yeah.
But this scene, like, I don't remember all the jokes in this scene, but there was some funny stuff where like Drax said something weird, and Peter's like, oh, don't mind him. He's a bit like loony or something.
He's like he's the boss's nephew. Or something.
Yeah, and then Nathan Fillion's like, "Oh, I got one of those too. This guy, And they have this whole conversation, and then at some point, like I remember there was a funny line where Drax is all, "Are we pretending to be mad at Mantis again?" Mantis, you asshole!
Right.
There was a lot of good jokes in that scene. I don't remember all of them, but I remember thinking that scene was very funny. So then they convince Nathan Fillion that they are workers there. So they split into two teams. Peter ends up bumping into this scientist, which will come into play later. So Peter, Nebula, and Gamora are one team. And they're going on the search for that module that has Rocket's information in it. And then Mantis and Drax are the other team. And the thing is, I don't remember like what they're trying to accomplish, but they basically almost immediately get spotted.
You're right.
Oh, but there is a funny scene that I didn't write down. where they get by this guard because Mantis forces the guard to fall in love with Drax, and he's like, every time.
Yeah, that's how they get through the checkpoint.
That scene was again. So this whole sequence is pretty funny. Peter tries and fails to seduce the woman in charge. When they're trying to get Rocket's information. So Gamora ends up just like threatening her life with a gun. Drax and Mantis get recognized by security, like I was talking about. At first, they get the upper hand due to Mantis's like mind powers. Like I remember she touched Nathan Fillion and says like you're a cat, and then she touches this other guy and like dance or something, and he's dancing all silly. And so they get the upper hand for a while, but eventually Nathan Fillion like gets back in the game, and he shoots Drax a couple times with like this large cannon.
Yeah, it fucks him up pretty good.
Which is like a teaser, like, oh, are they going to kill Drax here? Actually, before we got into this movie, I said if they kill anybody, I would think Drax would be like the most likely.
Well, it seemed likely because also like at some point Bautista had done an interview where he was talking about he was going to be done.
Yeah. Which I do kind of wonder, like, when we get to the end of this movie, it seems like going forward, he's at least going to have a very diminished role if he continues.
Right. And there's also the thing where, like, there are a couple people who are gone who kind of got, like, cameos. So.
Oh, that's true. That's true, yeah. So Peter's team, they end up getting Rocket's module, and they go back down to the ground level where all the chaos is going on. So they're getting shot at, but they're kind of in this like dome covering, so they're like temporarily protected. So Peter uses this charm to convince that one woman who is in charge to basically let him get into their system so he can like talk to everybody and like cool down the situation. But as soon as he gets in, he ends up turning off the artificial gravity, which causes like all the enemy guys to float,
Right.
Or maybe he's just taking control of those things in their suits you were talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I mean, they're still able to walk.
Yeah, maybe they did have like it was part of their suits.
I think so. That probably is why they're wearing the suits, so they can do that scene. Because yeah, they're still able to use gravity. The team calls Groot to fly in and pick them up. He ends up, having to crash into that facility basically, and they get in and get away. We get a flashback scene where Rocket and his friends name themselves. So the otter girl is Lila. The walrus named himself Teefs because of his big teeth. The rabbit was like, "Oh, I'm on the floor. Call me Floor." And then Rocket named himself Rocket. You know what? I'm going to get to another flashback scene, but I think there was a flashback scene before this one, but it doesn't really matter. I'll get to it. The team analyzed Rocket's module, and I think they I don't know if they get a video, but they decipher they get a glimpse of his past and like what he went through and everything, and they're like, "Oh, that was horrible." I think Nebula even was like, "Oh, his life was like worse than mine" or something.
Right, yeah. It has like the footage of his transformation.
But the thing they discover is that the key to that they're after was recently removed from that module. And they determined, I don't remember exactly how, but they determined that the key was probably stolen by that scientist Peter bumped into.
Right, he was on the log or whatever for the changes, so...
Okay. And they get a picture of him. He has like this kind of robotic thing on his head, and they're like, "Oh, he probably put the key into that thing."
He has a hard drive like
wired into
his brain or something.
I don't remember exactly what this conversation was, but I remember like Gamora gets mad at Peter, and Nebula kind of steps in and defends Peter as her friend, and says that Rocket was the one that upgraded her arm into like a weapon, and so that they're friends, and to kind of lay off. So Gamora gets angry and storms off. So in another flashback scene, and I think this one maybe actually might have occurred before that one I just talked about, but there's a flashback scene where the High Evolutionary is talking to Rocket, and he shows him that he made a replica of Earth that I think they call Counter Earth.
Yeah.
And his plan is that he's going to make these like perfectly evolved creatures and fill this Earth with them, and he's basically trying to make like the perfect Earth, if you will. So he shows Rocket, he's got these chambers, and he can put an animal in it, and it will instantly like evolve them into like the highest form of themselves. And he does it with a turtle. So he puts a turtle in there, and it becomes like this grown up like turtle, almost turtle human hybrid type thing. But the problem is it's like very aggressive. Right. Like there's something going on that's making it crazy. It's getting too much of a certain protein. And Rocket's like, "Oh, well, that thing on the side is causing a problem that's giving it the too much protein or whatever." And the High Evolutionary is kind of like dumbfounded that because Rocket's like this flawed creature, but he was able to like come up with this solution.
Right.
So he's like, kind of dumbfounded by it. So now we get a scene where Aisha asks at that facility. Now, what I don't really understand is like we never really saw any of the other Ravagers like at that facility. I didn't think any of them went along with the trip, but somehow they did catch one of the Ravagers at that site.
Yeah, I don't know.
And so they're gonna interrogate him, and he also has this like little cute dog. Like it doesn't look like a dog. It kind of acts like a dog, but it's some sort of creature. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, like yeah, we kind of skip over that part where the Celestial that was his, and in the fight, like that guy acquired it.
Yeah. So in this scene, and this is funny too. Like Aisha,
he's not a Celestial; he's a Goldie.
A Goldilocks. Aisha asks Adam to interrogate this Ravager, but he doesn't really understand, so he just like burns this guy to a crisp, like to a skeleton. And so then we get Aisha hears, even though that guy's dead, like Aisha hears like a noise coming from him, and basically there's a comm device on him, and we find out that Gamora is trying to reach the Ravagers, and so Aisha grabs that comm device, pretends to be a Ravager, and Gamora like gives her like I think the beacon to their ship,
their location,
so that basically they can follow. So Adam, he does adopt that dead Ravager's pet, whatever that thing is, as his own. In the final flashback scene, we see now this confused me. So like Rocket's in his cage, and like the High Evolutionary comes, but he's like on his knees. He's weakened, and the scientists mentioned that he was in the middle of one of his treatments. But there's never another scene that like suggests that there's something wrong with the High Evolutionary. So I
Well,
wasn't.
there is something later, but we don't know exactly what.
Well, I mean, coming up, I'll tell you what Rocket does to him. But besides that but this was before like Rocket messed him up. So I was like,
Oh, is that? I didn't know that was the result of him getting fucked up by Rocket.
no, I believe this scene was before he's messed up. Like he's coming to find Rocket, and like he's on his knees, and like I remember the scientist mentioned something about like, oh sire, you're like shouldn't do this. You're in the middle of your treatments, but they never really explain what that was.
Something about like maybe like the things that were wrong with him is why he's trying to create like more perfect creatures. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, that part was a little.
But he's also like a complete psychopath. So
Yeah.
who knows?
But basically, he takes Rocket, and now, like maybe it's minutes later, but he seems fine now. And he shows him that Rocket's solution worked, so that he can now evolve the animals just fine. And then Rocket says something like, "Oh, are we going to leave to the new world soon?" And he basically, the High Evolutionary laughs it off, and he's like, "I'm not going to take you and your friends. Like you're going to be incinerated, So Rocket gets sent back to his cell. Rocket is able to make like a key card for his cell. He breaks him and the others out, and then he gives Lila a hug. But basically, right as they're hugging, we hear a gunshot. The High Evolutionary killed Lila. So now this scene, like Rocket gets pissed off, and he just starts like ripping at the High Evolutionary's face. And so
I didn't know he did that much damage to him.
Well, I left this out because like when we first meet the High Evolutionary, you can see like his face looks like it's pinned on, like it's mangled on the sides.
Yeah, he's got like a metal thing that goes around, and like you can see like pinch marks, like it's like his face is.
Yeah, so you're kind of wondering like, what's this guy's deal? Like, is he a robot with a fake face on or something like that? But no, we find out here that like Rocket messed it clawed his face up so bad. This is what led to that.
Didn't at some point they called him like a RoboCop looking motherfucker or something?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, yeah. I don't remember where that line fits in, but they did. Yeah. So yeah, Rocket messes up his face. And then Rocket ends up getting in a firefight with some guards. He wins that fight, but then he turns around and he discovers that his other friends, Floor and Teefs, they got shot and killed in the process. Died. So he's the only survivor. So then Rocket he dodges a bunch of bullets and escapes on a spaceship out of there. So now we're back in present day. Peter and the Guardians are on their way to counter Earth to meet the High Evolutionary and get the key from the scientists. And they have this whole running thing where like Nebula's like, this is an obvious trap, but Peter is like, it's not a trap. If you know that it's a trap, it's a face off, he says.
Face off.
Now, the team end up like dressing in uniforms that are like, from the comics and everything. But my thing was like, where did they get these uniforms and why exactly did they change into them? They're not like armor or anything.
Well, in the beginning in that city, weren't they kind of like, well, they were putting up that sign, so I thought they were like for hire or something.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, because in that very, very opening montage where they're putting up that sign, like it looks like it's in a foreign language, but then when they do the title treatment, they basically take that sign and then it translates into Guardians of the Galaxy. Right. So you're right, it does almost seem like they were setting up like a Guardians for Hire type business or something. So yeah, maybe they did get these uniforms when they go on jobs.
We took them off the last crew.
So now that we get that scene you referenced earlier, where like, Mantis is like, Peter won't listen to me, Drax, so you talk to him. And so I forget exactly what it was, but Drax basically tells him, like, like your whole life, it's like you're in this pond, and you've been the women in your life have been lily pads, and you're just jumping from lily pad to lily pad, and so now it's time you got to learn to swim. And so I think he's basically saying, like, you got to learn to be comfortable, like, on your own,
right,
or something like that. But then, like, Drax starts, like, using these other weired analogies because, like, Peter's surprised.
Peter calls him out. He's like, "That was an analogy. I didn't think you were like capable." It's like I know analogies and metaphors.
And he's like, "I took a poop the other day that looked like a fish." That was an analogy.
Even my ass can do analogies.
Yeah. So it was funny, but like, yeah, very, very strange. So the team, they arrive to counter Earth and they land their ship in this residential neighborhood. This scene was also in the trailers, if you watch the trailers. So, they immediately piss everyone off because this little girl, like, passes them a dodgeball and Drax just, like, throws it right in her face. So they, like, start throwing rocks at him. And, they tell Groot to go into kaiju mode. So Groot grows all big and scares them off.
Big, yeah.
In the process, this woman falls down and scrapes her knee. Peter helps her so that she can kind of see, these guys don't mean us harm. So that woman brings them into her home. And, there's like Peter draws like a very crude drawing of that scientist because they're looking for him.
Drax and Mantis are both like impressed.
Yeah, and like they have this bit where Drax keeps trying to lay down on the couch, and they're like, "Sit up, that's rude," or whatever, Anyway, the family ends up conveying to them that the scientist they're looking for is in this large pyramid-shaped building that's in the distance. So Peter, Nebula, and Groot are gonna borrow that family's car and drive to the pyramid-shaped building. But Peter tells Drax and Mantis to stay with the ship to protect Rocket. And Gamora's also on that ship. Peter has Groot hide his element guns, like, in Groot's body.
Yeah. It comes out later. He's packing a lot of heat.
Yeah. We get a scene where Gamora's on the ship, and she kind of goes through Peter's things. She sees a photo of him with his mom and grandpa, and she kind of gets like a sense of like his past and who he is. So Peter, Nebula, and Groot get to that pyramid building, and they're greeted by like these large, like, animal robot hybrid guards. Like, one of them that'll come into play later is called War Pig. He's like a hog mixed with a robot. And there was another robot creature there too, but they don't really use him as much.
Yeah, he fell out later, and yeah.
So they scan them for weapons, and they're like, "Well, Nebula, your arm is a weapon, so you're not going to be allowed in." But they didn't find any guns on Peter or detect any guns on Peter or Groot, so they let them in. Now, these scenes I might get in kind of like the wrong order because they're all kind of happening at once, but close enough. So we get a scene where Drax, he gets a feeling that like they should leave the ship and go to the pyramid building because he's like, something's up. So he tricks Mantis onto getting onto this motorcycle with him. She thinks he's just going to drive it to the ship, but instead he starts driving it towards that pyramid building. So when Peter goes to meet the High Evolutionary sends that War Pig guy to go get Rocket. At first, the High Evolutionary is just like ignoring Peter, but then Peter sees that scientist and goes after him. And so this leads to the High Evolutionary having a conversation with Peter. I should mention that, like, on the car ride over, they saw like a drug deal going down with like
an octopus guy.
Yeah, like some of these hybrid creatures.
And some like kids with like cockroach heads.
So like, Peter tells this guy, is like, "Oh, your idea of this perfect Earth involves like these hybrid guys like having like meth deals gone wrong and stuff." And he's like, actually, no. And that's why I'm going to raise this place to the ground, like destroy everything and start over. So, yeah, he finds out that, like, this Earth, like, is going to be blown up. So the War Pig comes into the ship, tries to get Rocket. So Gamora tries to defend Rocket from the War Pig. I forget what exactly happens here. I think she must get knocked down or start to lose. But Adam Warlock shows up, and he, like, easily defeats the War Pig guy. And I remember they have a conversation because the War Pig's like, what are you doing? Like, we're working for the same guy. We're trying to accomplish the same goal. But I think Adam's basically like, yeah, but we need the credit.
Right, they're trying to get the credit for bringing Rocket in.
Because they're trying to get back in the good graces of the High Evolutionary. But while Adam is, like, beating the War Pig, Gamora is able to escape the ship with Rocket's body. So now we're back with Peter. Peter throws a grenade. This blows up, and it kind of creates a partition between the High Evolutionary and, like, him and the rest of the people there. So this, like you referenced earlier, Groot opens up, and he's got not only Peter's guns, but he had a bunch of other guns smuggled on too. So they just start wrecking shop and killing a bunch of these guys. Now, the thing is, like, they're killing, like, some guards, but it also looks like they're just killing some scientists too.
Pretty much indiscriminate.
Which may or may not be evil. I mean, they're working for this bad guy, so we're assuming they're kind of evil, but who knows? So now the pyramid building is revealed to actually be a huge spaceship, and it starts taking off. Now, this seemed like a bad idea, and I'm not even sure why he thought this was necessary, but Peter tackles that scientist, like, out of the spacecraft. And I'm like, why did he do this?
It was like that Dungeons and Dragons scene. Jonathan.
Actually, it was very similar to that, wasn't it? Yeah, so he tackles this guy out, and they would die, except Groot follows him out. And Groot grows wings, basically.
Yeah, he sprouts wings, and I don't think he's not quite flying, but it allows him to kind of glide roughly to the ground.
But I almost also was like, was that Groot's best idea? Like, he could have just, like, grown his tentacles down, grabbed them, and then just, like, I mean, I guess the spaceship is taking off, but maybe he could get down, like, fast enough without, just like...
Yeah, they were trying to get back to the spaceship. Well, they were going to have the spaceship come pick them up.
Right.
Hopefully before the planet explodes.
Yeah, so Peter tackles the guy, Groot goes after him. So now Adam, I think, starts to go after Gamora, but then this is where the Earth starts blowing up. And so Adam goes to try to save his mom, who is on the planet. But if I remember right, he fails. She ends up getting blown up. And so Adam actually heads back to the ship, but he gets knocked out, unconscious. Gamora has Rocket, but she sees all these explosions going off, so she's like, oh, I need to get back on the ship. She gets back on, and I think we get a short scene where she notices Adam's unconscious body there. So now Nebula... At some point, Nebula, she was on comms, and she found out that Drax and Mantis had left the ship, and they showed up there. And so they see that, everything's exploding and that ship's taking off. So they're like, oh, crap, they need to run and get on that ship. Yeah. It's their only chance. So they run, they jump, and they barely get on the bottom of the High Evolutionary ship. It starts going up into space. They almost freeze to death when Drax is able to finally break the door down and get him inside the ship. They discover a race of intelligent children that were made by the High Evolutionary. They're all in cages.
Were they made? Oh, yeah. There's a different scene that shows. For some while, I was thinking that they were going to be like the next round of experiments, but yeah, he'd already made them.
There was a short scene that showed one of these kids, like, running in this infinite hamster wheel loop.
Right.
And like he mentioned, like, these are kind of his perfect beings. But I think the thing is like, for some reason, like, they can do all this great stuff, but they still don't have, like, the cognitive creation powers that Rocket had for some reason.
Right. Rocket's like the only one of his creations that had, like, this this spark of
like creativity.
like intuition, creativity. Yeah.
So he wants to basically dissect Rocket's brain in hopes that he can imbue this characteristic on these kids, I think.
It's like, I don't think you really learn anything from dissecting like a smart person's brain versus like a dumb person, but
I know you got to take a little bit of like science fiction-y like and just go with it type of thing. So Peter and Groot land on the ground with that scientist guy, and like they basically just smash him against the ground, and then eventually like end in this pond where I think he just like drowns and dies.
yeah, pretty much.
And then Peter like cuts the key out of the head. At the same time, Gamora gets the plane in the air, but the ship in the air. But I don't know if it's damaged or she's just not an experienced flyer.
I think the controls are weird. Like she's struggling with the controls.
Oh yeah, she's like didn't understand the controls, so she ends up like crashing the ship and almost like running over Peter and Groot, but not quite. So they get on board. Peter connects the key to Rocket, but he still ends up flatlining. So now we get this scene with Rocket in like heaven. Basically, he meets Lila, and he can see like Teefs and Flora in the distance. And he's like, "Can I come with you?" And she's like, "Sure, but not quite yet. Like it's not your time." So Rocket comes back to life, and I think like Peter was like doing maybe like CPR on him or something
right.
too.
Extra dramatic.
Yeah. Rocket comes back to life. They all have a big old hug. So now Peter contacts Nebula, and he finds out the situation that her, Drax, and Mantis are stuck on the High Evolutionary ship. And then while they're on comms, the High Evolutionary discovers Nebula and the others. And I forget exactly what the conversation here was, but I think he basically tells them that if he wants the others, to stay alive, he's got to trade Rocket for them.
That's pretty much it.
And Peter basically just tells him to go F himself, if I remember right.
This might be where the RoboCop comments come in. I don't remember.
Now, I don't know if I'm getting this sequence right. I have some of this backwards, but at some point, Nebula. So I think this scene must happen before, but I'm not sure. At some point, Nebula's team, so Nebula, Drax, and Mantis, are thrown into this room with these large, like, monster guys, who I think were the same as the monster at the very beginning of Guardians 2.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mantis, like, uses her powers to save them. She susses out that these guys are afraid that they're going to be aggressive towards them, but really all they want is batteries, so they're not trying to kill them. So she just uses her powers to like tell them, hey, you're okay or whatever. Although you got to imagine Nebula might have a battery somewhere in her system.
So I think it must have been somewhere before this, but Gamora calls the other guy and the dog.
Well, yeah, I have that down here too. Peter contacts Kraglin and lets him know that he will need his help. The thing I was confused of, and why I might have that last monster scene, because I was thinking at first that the monster scene came later, but then I was like, we got this scene where Nebula, Drax, and Mantis are talking to the kids, trying to tell them to stay away from the starboard side.
Right, I think that came before. Yeah.
So I'm like, when did they get on comms? Because I would have figured the High Evolutionary would have taken away their comms so that they couldn't talk. And so that's why I thought he must have thrown them in with the monsters first, and then when they escaped, maybe they came back.
Well, I don't remember who called them. I was thinking it was Gamora, but was it Peter?
Well, I'm pretty sure Peter is the one that talks to Kraglin, but I'm not sure.
Maybe that's when Gamora picked him up.
But what I was confused on is I couldn't remember who was able to talk to Nebula and tell them their plans so that she would be telling the kids to stay away from the starboard side.
That I don't know. It all could have happened after they, Peter and Gamora met up.
Yeah, so we might have missed a scene here. But basically, we get a scene between Nebula, Drax, Mantis, and the kids where, like, at first, Nebula's trying to talk to the kids, but of course she can't understand them. Drax comes in and he gets the kids on his side, gets them laughing, like pretending, like he says he's gonna pretend to be a monkey, but then he like makes these sounds and they're like, "Is that what a monkey sounds like?" But then we also
I don't even remember the sound like he was making. It was like beep boop,
right?
bop bop.
Yeah, it didn't sound like a monkey at all. But then we find out that these kids, for whatever reason, speak Drax's like home language.
Well, that was another thing that led me to think that they were like going to be experiments and that they hadn't been created.
Oh, like maybe they were
They were
taken.
abducted or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
maybe.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know any other reason Drax would know their language.
Well, no, I think they had to. If they weren't fully like created, they were at least experimented on because that's why they have like hamster wheel energy and all
Right.
that stuff. But yeah, for whatever reason, they speak
In one of the
Drax's
other ones, did
language.
they talk about what happened to Drax's homeworld? Like Ronan came and fucked up a bunch of people, right?
Yeah, I don't think they like. We know that Ronan killed Drax's wife and child, and I think he killed a bunch of the other people. I don't know if he wiped out like the whole home
okay.
world or whatever, but yeah, he definitely like devastated his home planet in some way. But yeah, basically they tell them the kids, "Hey, stay away from the starboard side." So Peter breaks the Bowie, which is what they call this ship they've had in this movie. They named it the Bowie, which I think they must have got that ship in Avengers Endgame as well, I think. But anyway, it's able to split into 3 parts. So they got the main part that has, I believe, Peter and Gamora. One of the ships has Rocket and one has Groot. So they come upon like the high evolutionary ship. And then at the same time, Kraglin shows up out of nowhere, piloting nowhere.
The God's Head.
Yeah. And he is able to. Nowhere has this huge cannon, and it's able to blow a hole in the starboard side of the ship. The High Evolutionary releases a bunch of robot creatures. I don't remember. He had a name for them. I don't remember
Yeah, I don't know.
what he called them.
There's like a billion of them now.
And this ends up raising the ire of one of his underlings, where she's like, "Sir, should you be doing this?" And like, some more stuff happens. Like, this whole sequence, there's so much going on that I definitely don't have it in order. But at some point, like, he does something to where she's like questions his authority. So like, she almost tries to create like a mutiny, and she gets the other people on her side. But then he easily just like uses his gravity powers and puts them down. So I'm not exactly sure what the point of that was. But basically, these robots he lets loose. They end up infiltrating nowhere. But Kraglin, he gets like a vision of Yondu. I think you kind of mentioned like we get cameos by people that have been gone or whatever. So he gets this cameo of Yondu, a vision of Yondu, and this gives him like the courage or whatever to use the whistle arrow correctly. And he basically almost defeats all of these creatures except one that almost gets him. But luckily Cosmo is able to use her powers to smash the last bad guy. And of course this finally gets Kraglin to call her a good dog. You know, that's one thing about the enemies in this movie. I found them a little disappointing because like they're always easily defeated, it seems like. You never really get the sense that they're like they build them up and then they're easily defeated.
Yeah, none of them I guess they were super strong, but they had numbers.
Now, I think I am like missing some stuff that happened here outside in their ships, but at some point, Peter, Rocket, and Groot, they all end up on the High Evolutionary's ship with Gamora as well. And they're like, okay, we're going to find the others, and then we're going to get everyone out of here or whatever. But then conveniently, right at that time, the others break through the wall, and they're riding on those creatures that Mantis subdued.
Right.
Just like in the Mario movie, we get a needle drop that "No Sleep Till Brooklyn" Beastie Boys song plays.
I've been hearing a lot of Beastie Boys lately.
And we get like their badass like slow-mo walks that you get in these movies. So they open up this door. It ends up with, or this gets them in like a huge hallway fight scene where they beat a combination of men and like robot hybrid creatures. A pretty slick action scene. I don't remember all the little beats to it or anything, but you know, it was a pretty good action scene. So like the I think what happens is like the steering console on the ship is like messed up. So Nebula ends up having to use her robot arm to steer the ship. And so basically the plan is she steers the ship, the high evolutionary ship, and basically kind of docks it into nowhere.
Right, the eye socket.
And then Cosmo is going to use her powers to create a seal so that the kids can move from the high evolutionary ship to nowhere.
Yep.
Now this is another thing I lost track of, so I just wrote, at some point, Adam Warlock, we see that Gamora put him in restraints. He gets out of those restraints, and I think he gets himself into some sort of danger and is saved by Groot. And then, you know, he asks, why would you do that? And, you know, I am Groot. And Drax says, because he says that everyone deserves a second chance.
Yeah, I don't remember how he got beat down, but somewhere in there.
Yeah, something must have happened to him that allowed Groot to help him out. So they're getting the kids to safety, but Rocket, he stays behind to finish his business with the High Evolutionary. So Rocket discovers a cage full of baby raccoons, and he, you know, there's this whole bit throughout these movies, like, don't call me a raccoon, but he sees on this that they're from North America and they are, you know, called raccoons. He frees them from their cage, but then he's discovered and attacked by the High Evolutionary, who uses his gravity powers on him. But Rocket is able to use his anti-gravity boots to get back down on the ground. He shoots the High Evolutionary, and then basically out of nowhere, all the Guardians show up, and they just take turns and beat the shit out of the High Evolutionary. And this is another thing, like, he's easily defeated. Like, he's built up as this big bad, but then they just beat his ass. Like, so I'm like, I don't know. I felt it kind of made him a lesser of a villain, kind of. Now, I remember, like, you know, Rocket spares his life, and he's like, why would you do that? And he's like, because I'm a guardian of the galaxy or whatever. But, like,
You would have guarded more galaxy if you killed him.
I'm trying to think in the end, like, do you think the High Evolutionary, like, survived this, or does it, because do we ever see his ship actually explode or anything?
Well, I think, I don't know if it explodes, but like,
I mean, he's in a bad way. His whole face is ripped off, but
oh yeah, that was kind of a gnarly scene too. You see, like, yeah, underneath like the skin, there's just like this red or like raw meat and like missing nose and nose hole and stuff. So he's looking pretty gnarly when that comes off. But yeah, after that, like, Rocket convinces them they all have to go back and save the animals as well.
Right, and I have that wrote. Yeah, Rocket spares his life and convinces Peter to save all the caged animals. So, like, they're getting everybody off, but then, like, Peter drops his Zune and decides to go back for it. But this, like, causes him, like there's an explosion. He drops down a level. I think he, like, grabs this rope or something that propels him.
Yeah, it's like a hose or something, a rope. Or something.
Right. But then, like, so he's, like, floating over to nowhere, but then, like, he hits some debris, which slows him down.
Right, because this is all happening, like, right when Cosmo's, like, out of juice. Like, the two ships are coming out, you know, they're, like, undocking.
Right. So, yeah, Cosmo ran out of juice, can't save him. Groot tries to save him, but his tendrils only go out so far, and then they freeze and break off. And then Peter, like, he starts to freeze. Like, you see his face kind of, like, expand.
Right.
And, like, they tease it, like, oh, is Peter going to die a horrible death right here now?
There were a number of times where they were, like, exposed to, like, raw space, and I was like, these guys are pretty fucked right now.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, the only thing is like in my head, I did predict because I'm like, oh, now Adam Warlock's on their side, so he'll save him, and that's exactly what happened. So yeah, Adam Warlock saves him. Uh, and then so yeah, we start basically getting a series of wrap up scenes. Peter and Gamora have like a heartfelt goodbye. Um, and then so Peter tells the group that he's gonna leave and find his grandpa back on Earth. Oh, I did forget to mention like back in like that lily pad scene or whatever. I think, or maybe it was before that, and maybe that was towards the beginning. Anyway, at some point, Mantis had a conversation with him that he should probably go and see if his grandpa's still alive.
Right.
So he decides to do that. Mantis also mentions that she's going to go away for a while because like she spent her whole life like following Kurt Russell's orders or whatever, and she's just like, oh, I need to go find myself or whatever. Nebula and Drax decide they're going to stay on Nowhere and kind of help this burgeoning society and like take care of the kids. And I think they mentioned that like she says like Drax like is a good father figure or something like that.
Right, he's supposed to be a father or dad.
And then the group elects Rocket to be the new leader of the Guardians. Oh, and also Groot finally breaks from tradition and he says, "I love you guys." Do you think going forward, because they've done this in the comics too, where like Groot finally actually started speaking instead of just saying, "I am Groot."
Maybe.
Do you think they'll do that? And then we kind of end with this montage. So Peter does meet up with his grandpa, which his grandpa's named Jason. In the comics, like his father is named Jason. His father is not Ego like they did in this series. So a little bit of a callback to the comics. We see Mantis leave, like riding. Well, I don't know if she rides him, but she leaves with her creatures. We see Gamora like greeted and hugged by her fellow Ravagers. And then basically all the other ones are just having a happy dance with the kids on Nowhere. And
yep.
That's where the movie ends. So then we get a couple of end credit sequences. So Stinger #1, mid-credit sequence. The New Guardians, comprised of Rocket, Groot, Kraglin, Adam Warlock, Adam Warlock's pet, and we find out that like one of the girls they were talking to is Phyla-Vell, a character from the comics that I don't know much about, but she has these bands on her arms that allow her to basically shoot laser beams. Was there anyone else in that group? I can't remember.
You say Cosmo?
Oh, you're right, Cosmo as well. Okay. I think that's all of them. And we see basically that they're just going to save these villagers from like this weird like pack of wild animals that are coming towards them. And so, yeah, we just get a sense that there's this new group of Guardians. And then we wait through all the credits, which your son just couldn't stop complaining about. And he ended up being right, yeah. So we just get this weird scene where, like, Peter's eating cereal, and he has this conversation with his grandpa where, like, I think, what was it? Like, his grandpa insisted on, like, mowing the lawn himself. So he's like, what are people going to think? You got, like, this healthy, able-bodied, like, 45-year-old that refuses to mow the grass or something like that. Anyway, the only interesting thing is once that's over, we get a title sequence that you spoiled earlier. The Star-Lord will return, which I thought when he did the whole I'm going to go to Earth and find my grandpa, I thought, oh, okay, maybe they're giving Chris Pratt a send off, like giving him an out. But then apparently he's coming back, which hey, I'm happy. I like the Star-Lord character. I'm all for seeing more.
Star-Lording by himself.
That's what I'm wondering.
Of all the characters, who would you like to see a spin-off with?
Ooh. Well, I mean, coming out of this movie, like, I think I just want to see that new Guardians movie with Rocket's new team. But as far as, like...
I'm wondering if Mantis could have a...
I really do like the Mantis character. But I have she's really, she's friends with James Gunn. And I gotta imagine, she's gonna get some sort of role in the DCU. Actually, they announced that voice cast for that Creature Commandos cartoon. I wonder if maybe she was announced for that. I don't remember. Um, but yeah, as far as a solo film, I don't know. Like, yeah, Star-Lord could do a solo film. Who would you choose?
Yeah, I was wondering if. Well, they said Star Lord will return. I was wondering if he was going to have just like a different adventure.
My kind of feeling, they say he'll return, but I kind of think it'll be in more of like a cameo thing. Like maybe he'll show up in like an Avengers type thing. I mean, they could do a solo film, but I don't know. I could imagine like his
in the quantum verse.
I just feel like, much with like Robert Downey Jr. and Captain America, once people are in these movies for long enough, eventually they're going to want to go do other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they've already been doing like 10 years or something. So,
and also like, the Marvel, they're smart. They sign these guys to like 8 movie deals and stuff like that. But I got to imagine like if they hit that and are like, okay, if I'm coming back, you're going to really back up the truck. So like, I always kind of figure that into the equation too. And
still looking like maybe Howard the Duck could be in the works.
Oh yeah, I forgot Howard Duck.
We had a cameo from Howard the Duck.
Another short Howard the Duck cameo. Yeah, I still don't think I want a Howard the Duck movie.
I thought you liked detective movies.
You know what? Like, I know when I was a kid, I saw at least scenes from that Howard the Duck movie. I remember nothing about it.
I remember like in the opening where he's like flying through like people's personal spaces and stuff. I remember like the bad guy, like there's a scene, I want to say they're in a car or something, but like he sticks out this long gross tongue. That's like all I remember.
Doesn't he also have like a sex scene with Leah Thompson?
I think there might have been rumors of that. I don't remember.
I can't be bothered to actually watch that movie. Right. I'm like, I know it won't be worth it. Even if there is a Leah Thompson sex scene, it's not going to be not going to be worth it.
You could probably just YouTube that clip.
That's probably true.
People check your search history. They're like, some weird shit. Weird shit, boyo.
Oh, let me ask you this. So, like, him and Gamora kind of come to this place where they're like, she's not...
Slightly more respectful.
She's not who he fell in love with or whatever. Now, do you hope they just kind of end that relationship there and have actually Star-Lord maybe have to grow? Maybe he falls in love with someone else? Or do you kind of hope that something happens to where those two do end up forming a relationship again?
Well, I wasn't thinking with her. I was thinking there's at some point like he's going to figure a way to actually bring her back.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. Although, would people think that would be like an FU and like even make less stakes in this universe that already has?
Well, the thing is, I don't know like the exact rules of jumping off the mountain.
Yeah, I know.
But well, there's that. There's also like part of me wonders if like his powers are just dormant, and like he's still gonna have like some godlike powers at some point.
Oh yeah, I forgot that aspect of thing because he is like half kind of godlike,
right? Because Mantis, she didn't lose her powers.
Right. So maybe he can like sacrifice his power to bring her back.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think there's interesting ways to go. The only thing is like, I like Rocket and I like this team of New Guardians, but like I do think it's missing I think like. Peter, Drax, Mantis, they brought a lot to that group. And Nebula.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
But I wish I could remember more of the jokes because there were a lot of jokes in this movie and like a lot of them hit, I thought. Like
yeah, not bad.
But yeah, I definitely overall more like I was saying earlier, definitely more dour than the other ones. There is a lot of kind of like serious and sad scenes as well.
Well, I mean, you have they put in like Rocket's whole backstory, and that's all sad. And then like
Gamora and Peter.
When you cut to the front, like he's dying, like the whole like the time tension of the whole movie's based on his like dying.
That's true. Half the movie he's dying.
Right. So it does have a lot of somberness.
Yeah. And it's James Gunn's last movie in that series. So, but yeah, overall liked it a lot. Let's go to the voting round. What are you going to give this bad boy on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd do a 90% on this one, a 9 out of 10.
I'm not going to go quite that high, but I'm going to give it like a 7.8.
Yeah.
I thought it was very good.
Yeah, I'd definitely watch it again.
Out of curiosity, and I know there's a lot of Marvel movies you haven't watched, but of the ones you have, what do you consider like just like the top echelon?
Guardians is the top for me. I think Thor Ragnarok's up there for me. I mean, those are a couple of the heavy hitters for me. Everything else there's a lot of stuff I felt was kind of like
middle.
In the middle, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of middle of the road ones. I think for me, like always fighting for the top spot for me are Guardians 1 and the OG Iron Man 1. I love the original Iron Man as well.
Yeah, that one was another one that's it was okay for me.
Man. The only thing disappointing is the other Iron Mans aren't very good. And I still think for me, Iron Man 3 is at the very bottom of the MCU. I think it's still like the worst one.
Yeah, I fell asleep in that one.
Oh, I was so disappointed.
I don't think I like the second one either.
The second one's a big...
I don't remember shit about the second one.
Actually, I maybe should go watch the second one. To me, like a lot of people bash on the second one, and it definitely was a big step down from the first one, but I remember liking aspects of it at least. But yeah, man, in conclusion, go watch Guardians 3 in the theater. It's a great time, great movie. Highly recommend it. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Not really. I think I'm pretty good.
All right, everybody. We thank you very, very much for watching and listening. If you will, please go to the YouTube channel, subscribe. Please leave us comments. If you saw the movie, let us know what you think. Thumbs up. If you will, take a little bit of time, write a positive review on your podcast service of choice, where you can also listen in audio form. And you can come over and bother us on Twitter. Where can people find you on the Twitter?
At Unsolicited SUG.
And you can, of course, find me at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. And that is going to do it for all of our shenanigans and poppycock this week. Please, please, please tune in again next week. Bye, guys.
Have a good one.